We came here to Jerusalem to look into claims that most recently appeared in a best-selling book called The Da Vinci Code. Claims that have existed for centuries and legends and stories that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were husband and wife, and that they may even have had a child. This is not an easy subject to tackle. There's very little information about what went on in this place in the first century, and scholars often take the information that is available and give it wildly differing interpretations. But knowing that, we set out to find out what the Christian Bible tells us about Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
She is obviously one of the intimate followers of Jesus from the standpoint of being a disciple and a follower. What she isn't is married to Jesus or any family that we can tell of, because she isn't named as a relative or anything like that.
We asked the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops for the Catholic Church's position on Jesus being married. It said there was no official doctrine on the subject, but that the Church's opinion is he was not married because it is not in the Gospels. Now, it's true that the Bible doesn't say Jesus was married, but it also doesn't say he was single. We asked all kinds of historians whether it was at all possible and got a range of opinion.
Jesus was not married, even though I think especially in the last 40 years there have been so many books written trying to get Jesus married off, like some anxious mother for an over-eligible bachelor son, whatever.
I think it's entirely plausible to think that Jesus may have been married. It was a normal practice for Jewish men. It would also be normal not to mention that he had a wife.
It would have been unusual for a rabbi not to be married, but the weight of evidence that we have suggests to me the contrary, that in fact he was a celibate.
Everything that we have in church tradition suggests that Jesus was single.
Is there any evidence in the Bible at all, anything that educates us or tells us whether or not Jesus might have been married?
No.
Nothing either way?
There's nothing. Which doesn't mean now, I'm not saying, therefore, it's impossible that he could have been married. Is it possible he was married? Yes.
That wouldn't threaten his divinity in any way?
Not in my opinion, unless you regard sexual intimacy and the married state as somehow sinful or corrupting, then the answer to your question is no, Jesus could have been married, and it would have been without any compromise whatever.
And still be able to be the Son of God.
Yes, and without any compromise of the Church's historic faith in him as truly God and truly human.
Jesus does a lot of things that are very human that don't take away from his divinity. I don't think it would necessarily detract from his divinity if he ended up being married.
But neither Dr. Bach nor Father McBrien thinks Jesus actually was married. They say the strongest evidence is found in the Bible.
One of the earliest writings that we have is by the Apostle Paul, who's not into hiding anything. And he asks a question at one point about whether or not he has the right to have a wife.
Dr. Bach is talking about the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians.
Paul is kind of whining, kind of complaining about the fact that he wanted to be married.
Paul says, don't I have a right to have a wife like the brothers of Jesus and like the other apostles, including Peter? If Jesus had been married, he would have said, don't I have a right to have a wife like Jesus does? He doesn't say that.
Still, the novelist Dan Brown claims that the evidence Jesus was married and married to Mary Magdalene is even more convincing.